Well, thanks for making it out tonight. This is our second Barnabas Forum of the semester, our fourth of the year. So this will be the last one for our semester. We're super excited to have our guests here tonight, and I think this is going to be a really fun and stimulating conversation. So just as a reminder, the Barnabas Forums, these are some of the things that we do here for the Barnabas program in terms of co-curricular events, things that we do where we kind of have this layer of engagement with local pastors. So we've got a couple of pastors from the Valley who have come. And we're going to talk about the topic of engagement inside and outside of the church. So we've been talking about pastoral identity over the course of this year. What does it mean to be a pastor? And some of the different dynamics that are related to that identity as a pastor. And tonight I really wanted us to talk about what it means to be a pastor, especially in our relationship with people who are outside of our congregations. So what does it mean for us if we're doing ministry in the church in terms of our engagement with the community around us, the kind of public ministry that are beyond the walls of our congregations and our sanctuaries. So super excited about that. So tonight's panel is, I'm excited. We had a couple of people that weren't able to make it tonight, so we got a smaller panel, but I think it's going to be good because we got some deep stuff to talk about, and I'm really excited about these guys. So these two pastors that I have up here, we got Sean Warren from Redemption Gilbert and Robert Lorenzano from Amazing Grace in Glendale. And yeah, give them a hand. Give them a hand. So when I think of these two guys, I think immediately of their engagement in the kind of public sphere, in the life outside of the church. Both of them are pastors, and they shepherd congregations and people within their church, but they are also like really engaged with stuff going on in their communities. And I think we've got a really interesting dynamic too. Just we've got the west and the east side of the valley repping here. And the communities are different when we kind of look at maybe the appearances or the demographics that they're placed in, and yet some of the problems and some of the challenges that the communities face are consistent throughout. And they both have been super engaged in that kind of public witness and that public work. So I'm really excited about our conversation. Rather than really do a bio for you guys, I'm going to let you tell a little bit of your story. So let's get started. And we'll do the same thing here tonight, where I've got a few questions I'm going to ask with them, and we'll wrap up here, and then we're going to open it up to you. So be logging all the questions that you have as we go. So as I said, like when I think of the two of you, I think about, not just what you're doing as pastors in your churches, but the things that you're doing in your communities. And I would love for you, Sean, maybe to lead us off, just kind of like, what are some of the stuff that you've done outside the walls in Gilbert, and maybe even in your own history, but tell a little bit of the story of how you got there and why you have such a conviction about this.
Yeah. First, I want to thank you guys for being here tonight, because maybe you had to be here tonight, but some of you didn't. Regardless, Robert and I were just talking about what an encouragement this is, seeing you guys. This is like part of the Calvary of ministry that comes in. It's just another generation of people who want to faithfully serve. And so it's just really great to see you guys tonight. I grew up in a Christian home, and the way that I was raised up is that if you were serious about your faith, you would go into full-time ministry. And so that's kind of how it was predicated. And so I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I ended up going to a Christian college in Nashville, Tennessee. And then I went to work, went and then did graduate studies in South Carolina, MA in Muslim studies. So I had planned on going overseas to work as a missionary. And I did, but before I did that, I spent almost 5 years at the Nashville Rescue Mission, which was a very, very shaping time for me. And one of the reasons why it was so shaping for me I was there, and part of what it was that I did was direct their education department. And one of my own brothers, who was older than me, who would oftentimes disappear in life, he was 12 years older than me, came through as a homeless man. And it was one of the most surreal moments of my life, seeing him come through the doors. And so I asked him, we were raised in the same home. How in the world did you get here? And he, for the first time in his life, shared the story of a lot of abuse, sexual abuse that he had experienced growing up. And it really just messed him up in a way that none of our family understood. My parents thought he just became really rebellious and started acting out and running away from home. And so he unloading his story to me was really shaping to me to understand that every single person that you run into has some kind of story. It may not be that type of story, but there's a context to them. So when I went to the mission field and came back, and I had different jobs in ministry, but when I landed in Gilbert's relatively affluent. It's about $115,000 is the average household income. That just came out recently. There's not a whole lot of homeless ministry there, but there are homeless people there. So my own personal story, while I didn't experience homelessness, I had a brother who did, and that really compelled me because it was personal to get involved in homeless ministry that we do at Gilbert, and I don't know how that maybe this is
Yeah, yeah.
set
Well,
in the first
maybe
stage.
also, so the last couple years, you've been engaged in local
Yeah.
government
Yes.
projects as well. So
So I had I've always wanted to be a Christian that was mindful of politics. There's the good of politics, although that feels like a phrase anymore that's abandoned. And so I had a friend a couple of years ago who suggested there was an opening for a task force for the town of Gilbert to tackle issues related to poverty, homelessness, mental health, domestic violence, and just overall how to make Gilbert a more accommodating and loving town. And so he encouraged me to apply, and I applied and ended up chairing that task force, and then pulling back the curtains and seeing all the problems that are in the city that the church should be stepping into and meeting those needs was super challenging to me. And from that, the town of Gilbert asked our church if we would start a cooling station. A couple of summers back, there was over 600 people who died because of the heat in Maricopa County. And so they asked us to open a cooling station. And this summer will be our 4th year doing it. And it really, in small, quiet ways, has revolutionized part of our ministry of what our church does. So that's been very rewarding.
yeah, that's great. Thank you. Robert, tell us a little bit about what you do at Amazing Grace, some of the stuff you do inside the church and outside the church, and why. What's your story?
Okay.
How'd you get there?
All right. Thank you all for being here. The way I got into ministry was, my story is a little different than most pastors. This is a second career for me. I was a mechanic and a truck driver for years, and but even before that, I was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I was out in the streets. I'd been homeless. I'd been in jail. I had been just through so many different things, and over the years, I had attended church, a Lutheran church, same church I'm at today, and at some point, a girlfriend of mine brought me there, and I started doing music ministry with Church on the Street. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Church on the Street, but I'm a musician as well. So I started doing Church on the Street, and about 2 years before that, though, I got into recovery from drugs. So I was in recovery from drugs. I'm doing Church on the Street, and and I'm going to Amazing Grace Church. And I just, the thing I tell people when they ask me, how can I get to where you are in the ministry, I say, just never say no to God when God gives you something to do. When God presents something in front of you, never say no to God. So I just went along after 4 or 5 years of being in recovery and attending church. We started going to Celebrate Recovery, which is a recovery ministry that's within the church, but it's separate from the church, but they're held in the church. So we started doing a recovery ministry, and as I'm doing recovery ministry, the pastors there saw that I was practically preaching, I'm basically preaching in this ministry to the people, but it was about addictions and about hurts, habits, and hang-ups. And so they asked me if I'd ever consider becoming a pastor, and that's how I got into pastoral ministry. And so I started attending seminary, and while I was in seminary, I started doing youth ministry. So I was doing youth ministry, attending seminary, working full-time, and being a pastor's assistant at the same time. And I did that for about 3 years. I got through that, and we started to do homeless outreach ministry. And so we've been doing homeless outreach ministry now for, I'm going to give you the years, okay? I want you guys to hear how long we've been doing this stuff. So we've been doing a recovery ministry since 2013. We've been doing youth. I did the youth ministry from 2016 to 2019. I've been on the council of the church since 2017. And we've been doing homeless outreach ministry since 2019. And it really ramped up after COVID. And the neighborhood that we live in, 75th Avenue and Camelback, there's a really large homeless population today due to the fentanyl crisis and a lot of other things going on in the city. So I've been doing that, and then just in 2023, our church has been doing jail ministry since 2004. So we do jail ministry as well. So I'm involved in the jail ministry, involved in the homeless outreach ministry. We have a ministry within the church called Bags of Love, which is the bags that we give out to the homeless people. And they can consist of anything from, hygiene to food or whatever. But it's just a way for us to get people into the church. Our mission statement in our church is to love all people to Christ. So we welcome everyone from drug addicts to homeless people we literally love all people to Christ and welcome all people into our doors of our church. And we've gotten many people off the streets and many people into programs. And we're trying to be the light in our neighborhood to just to let people know that it's a safe place and they can come and they can come to church on Sunday and they can come to Bible study on Wednesday. And so those are some of the ministries that I'm involved with and basically how I got to where I'm at today. I was ordained and installed in February 2001, and I became senior pastor in January of 2022.
What you've also been doing stuff in the prisons or in jail ministry. What
Yeah,
have you been doing there?
So we do jail ministry. We don't do prison ministry, but we do jail ministry at the Durango complex on Durango and 35th Avenue. And so we have about 18 services a week. Right now we have 10 jail pastors, and we do one-on-ones, and we probably hold services and get to witness to at least 150 to 200 inmates a week.
Amazing. So let me just kind of ask, like, from what is the fruit of all of this that you've been doing? And I'm thinking, like, in your own lives and in the lives of the church, how have you seen this kind of engagement outside the walls growing you and growing the people in your congregations?
I think one of the ways that it has grown me personally is the feeling of I need to be part of the solution of this. It's easy to fund a social program or say my taxes are going to whatever, but to actually take the responsibility to say, I, as a Christian, have a capacity to do something that intersects with this person right here and helps make their life better. And it's made me more conscientious, I think. Something that in working with the homeless around our church, there's one particular man, Miles is his name, and he stands on the street corner. And every time I see him, we've tried to get him into treatment and help, and he's troubled. He'll hold up a sign that says, "I'm schizophrenic. Hi, my name's Miles. I'm schizophrenic." And so everybody at the church tries to engage him when they're driving by or talk to him. And I've been able to get my children to see Miles. And I think one of the challenges of a pastor is to raise the awareness of your congregation to those people who are invisible in some ways. And so being able for my children to see that, now they know Miles, they talk about Miles, they will take him dinner sometimes. And then inside the church, as we have engaged through our cooling station, so the cooling station, we've taken the hottest month of the year, we take July, and from 9 to 5, we have a place where people can come in, they can take showers, they get fed home-cooked meals, and our church provides that. And I can remember when we first went to do this, you know what it's like to get quiet resistance on something. It's like, well, I can't say I'm resisting this because it feels like it's something Jesus may do, but I don't feel all that comfortable doing that. And I got some of that pushback. And then a year later, I got a letter from one of the ladies in our congregation who just said, "Thank you for leading us in this direction because it has opened my eyes to what I need to be doing." And she is one of the number one advocates for the ministry that we do that way. And so I think engagement outside the walls of the church keeps our congregants' hearts tender. I think when they see a pastor doing it, it also says, oh, this isn't something that's just delegated out or relegated to somebody else who cares about that. Because one of the things that I hate is when people say, and I'm sure, Robert, you've experienced this, oh, it takes a special person to do that kind of ministry. It's like, don't allow somebody to put you on a pedestal because what they're doing is trading off their responsibility for your ego. And so it's like, no, it just takes somebody willing to do it, And so for our church, as it's growing in this direction, I just feel like it's also opening our people's eyes to how our church is an answer to bigger problems in the community. One quick example to that. Last year, we partnered with several different organizations to do this during the summers. And one of the organizations has a shower trailer that they would bring in. But because of problems bringing it and transportation issues and whatnot, we had an inconsistency with having that shower trailer. And that may not sound like a big deal, but it's really great to be able to provide a shower for people that you're in a room with every day. And
Why is that?
Well, you did feed me pita jungle, and I'm sure my breath right now isn't great after having pita jungle. But when we were debriefing with Maricopa County and the town of Gilbert, one of the things that we said in the debrief was, hey, it would be great if you had a shower trailer available for anybody to use that's offering services like this. And I said, I don't know if you can get a grant or whatever, but that would just be a great thing. So probably a month and a half ago, I received an email from some of the people working for the town. They said, hey, the fire department has a really big trailer that it does public awareness to how to mitigate fires, and they haven't been using it. It was given by a grant, and we were just wondering if your church would be willing to receive that for the price of $1. And I looked up the trailer, and it was like $110,000 outfit. And it was one of those things where the church came back to us whenever I was sharing this with our elders and whatnot. They're like, it's kind of like, wow, how did that happen? That's great. And the neat thing is, when the city sees you as being a good neighbor, or if I can even go a step further, I don't know who said yeah, but I appreciate that. It's really encouraging to me. I like that. When the city sees you as a good neighbor, or when people that are skeptical of the church, and they're like, you have a tax exempt organization. It's like, oh, well, maybe they do good things. It just doesn't feed themselves or promote good for them, but it's also for the community. So that engagement that goes beyond the walls adds a level of credibility to our gospel message, and it's not just self-dealing to ourselves. And I've got to tell you, for me, where the real action is in ministry is outside the walls of the church. Now, that's just the way that I'm wired, and I'm not saying, pulpit ministry is a bad thing. I'm not saying that at all. At all.
I don't hear it.
Please don't report that to anybody that we have as friends.
We have it on video.
On video, yeah, it's going to be on YouTube. But to be involved outside the walls lends back an element of credibility, and it also tells your church we value in the leaning into the hard things in our community. And if there's anywhere where the church should be, where you should be as leaders, it's in the problems. I think it's Jeremiah 29:7. It's Babylonian captivity. It's bad, and God says, in fact, I'm just going to read it.
Build the houses and the plant the vineyards.
No, this isn't the build the houses and plant the vineyards. And where the heck's my phone? It's this verse that I just love so much. In fact, it was a couple of years ago that I feel like God gave me this verse, Jeremiah 29:7. But seek the welfare of the city where I've sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. For in its welfare, you will find your welfare. And if the church, or even in your own life, if you're struggling for what your purpose is or engagement, I swear to you, you lean into the needs of the city around you, you will find more purpose, more witness, and more opportunity than you could possibly have lives to capitalize on.
Great, thank you. It's good stuff. Robert, you want to add that? How have you seen it in your own life and in the life of your congregation?
Okay.
You guys are engaging these things.
Well, yeah, in my own life, like I said, that's what got me into ministry was first, exploring the ministry outside of the church, even before I got to the church. But in our church today, our church has evolved. We were we got Lutheran roots. I went to Lutheran seminary, and we were a Lutheran church by our roots. And but today we're a non-denominational church. And what happened was, over time, the ministries that we're involved in, the church changed with the ministries. As the ministries came through, the people in our congregation changed, and some of the old Lutherans left, and on good terms, but we got so many new people coming in, and a lot of those new people that came into the church were actually from these different ministries. So half of our recovery ministry is our church, and that's pretty rare. Most recovery ministries in a church are probably 75% from outside the church. Some are 0% from inside the church. So our congregation has grown and evolved into, we call ourselves a recovery church now, basically. So we're a recovery church who's my senior pastor that I discipled under, he was in recovery as well. So we got a lot of history of recovery in our church. So it's always been something that we've been involved in, and the jail ministry as well. But today, our members in our church have all, I'd say about 90% of them have had some type of recovery or addiction, or maybe not them themselves, but in their families or their friends, or they've been involved in it in some way. And so we just kind of attract that type of those type of people today. But I've also noticed, especially recently, that we have a lot more people that are engaged today than we did before. More people want to serve. I mean, before it was just a bunch of people punching their ticket and filling the pews, and we had the numbers, and we were counting the nickels and the noses, and but today we don't do that. Today it's more about being a servant, and the Lord gives us confirmation every week that we're doing the right thing, and the Lord also provides for our church, and we've done well, even without, like we were talking about earlier, without the older people with all the money leaving since they've left. The Lord still provides for our church. So it's an amazing thing that we've evolved into, but it goes hand in hand with our ministries, our outreach ministries. So we continue to grow, and we know we're doing what Jesus would be doing. Amen.
Did you? Yeah.
Can I add one other thing? Another ministry that we're doing outside our church is, for about a decade, we've been involved in going to Washington, D.C. and advocating for those living in extreme poverty. So we partner with the One Campaign. And one of the things that involvement has done for us, whenever you go to Capitol Hill and you're meeting with your senators or your congressmen or women, and you're advocating for something that doesn't come directly back to you. Everybody else who goes to Capitol Hill, they're lobbying for something that they want done for them or in their state. This is on behalf of somebody else who I'm not going to see them. And what that has done in our church with people who've been involved with that is it also leads them into tension. And I think one of the greatest things ministry outside the walls of the church can do is to bring tension to your people. And what I mean by that is, why is it when I go to Capitol Hill that people that line up on some policy things with maybe some of the ways I think don't seem to be as compassionate in some areas as others, or it's vice versa, it's back and forth. So being able to lead your people into conflict of saying, man, issues in society are super complex. There's no one size fits all. And we get to work with other people outside the walls of the church. It's a gift to go and do that. And so living in that conflict, I feel like has been a beautiful development inside me and inside others who do that. In fact, each fall we try to take a trip to Washington, D.C., and we're calling it political discipleship. And so we go to several different museums, we meet with our congressmen, our senators' offices, and then we go to the One Campaign, which is the big nonprofit, to actually talk about what are the needs hitting the impoverished parts of the world, and how can we lend our voice to that, and helping our people put a megaphone up to their individual voices on behalf of the marginalized.
No, that's good. One of the things that I'm hearing in that is just by doing this stuff, there's engagement and ownership that not students, but the congregation is doing. And my illustration is always kind of like, you don't learn how to play basketball by just sitting around and talking about basketball and reading the rule book. You go out and you start playing it, and then you start learning that game, and but oftentimes in Christianity, we just sit around and talk about Christianity and all the things that we should do, and we read the rule book. But this kind of gets us out on the court and gets us out playing, which leads to growth. So one of the things that I wanted you guys to talk a little bit about, in Paul's description of qualifications for elders in 1 Timothy 3, he says a lot of things about what an elder should be in terms of their character. He wraps it all up, though, with they must have a good reputation with outsiders. What do you think, you've touched on a little bit, I think, or hinted at a little bit of that, but what do you think is going on there? And what is it that the challenges, like as pastors, what challenges do you face with that in terms of having that good reputation and engagement outside the walls?
I think ministry can be a place that inflates an ego really quickly. And, you know, you do something, you speak at church, people tell you, hey, great job. They probably weren't even listening. They're on their phones or whatever. But at the end, it's like obligatory to tell your pastor, oh, that was very convicting. I appreciate that. Or whatever it is. I feel like having a good reputation beyond the walls of your church, if society can sniff anything out, I think they can sniff out a hypocrite. Amen? Thank you. Appreciate that. Your enthusiasm.
You've done such a good job at ministering to my heart there.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. And so to have a good reputation, the way all of us live our lives either validate what we say we believe or invalidates it. And while we're not perfect, striving to have a good reputation outside with the outsiders, as some translations put it, it's a humbling thing to walk on the outside with people, because all of a sudden you're aware of how you're being perceived and you're not in your Christian cocoon or bubble. And so I think what that does is it humbles us. It keeps you humble. It keeps you humble. And I think if the American church could use anything, it's probably a couple more doses of humility. Tag.
Well, we are the church, all of us, right? We're the church, not the building, not the school, but each of us are the church and the body of Christ. And in recovery, we say they don't care what you know until they know that you care. And I think that's got a lot to, that explains, you know, what we do outside of the church. When the people, even your congregation, know that you really care about people, even outside of the church, I think it really helps us grow as the body of Christ. It makes us stronger because they know, and you're also being an example. You're being a living testimony of what our ministries really mean, and I think the congregation respects that, and it helps us to grow spiritually as a church, and to get more engaged. We were talking about being engaged in the different ministries as a congregant, as a member of the church. Getting everybody, you know, I'm starting to see, you know, as maybe 5 years ago, 20% of the church was involved and the rest were just coming for Sunday service. Now we have 50% of the church involved in different ministries, different events, different outreaches. And it's a great thing to see, but when we see each other being the hands and feet of Christ outside of the walls of the church, it really helps us to grow spiritually, I believe.
Yeah. Great. So, all right, I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to come out there so you guys get your questions ready, all right? Sound good? So do you think every pastor should be thinking about some way that they're doing something outside the church? What are the challenges to that for some pastors? And then I guess not everybody's got to do homeless ministry, not everybody's got to do jail ministry or recovery ministry. How would an individual like these students think about what might be their way to engage outside?
Well, your first question is to barriers to that? Or
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
should everybody try and
Yeah.
do this, and what would be the barriers to that?
So with each and every one of you in here has a different story, and God has created different capacity in you, and you have your own POV, and you see things that God has stamped on you that's unique. And so if you go to vocational ministry, if you're leading a congregation or helping lead a congregation, God has given you eyes to see things uniquely. Now, other people may see part of that too, but absolutely a pastor should be thinking beyond where they're just the congregation in front of them. But sheep are needy. And if you're a pastor and your sheep, it takes intentionality, or they'll take up all your time, and so knowing that it makes you better to have stuff beyond the walls of your church leads you to block that time and to get out there and do that. But I would definitely say you want to do that, because if you don't, the sheep have a way of claiming all your time inside all their little things. And your sheep are important. Those are the sheep God's given you, right? He's hooked you up with those people to love on. But one of the greatest ways that you can love them is showing that there's a world bigger than them, that they then can go and engage as well. And you're a forerunner for them, getting them out there and do it.
I think the size and the scope of the church plays an important part of that. If you're going to a big church like CCV and that has 20, 25 different pastors doing different jobs, it's a lot different than a church like mine where the pastor has, 15 hats that he wears, and I have an assistant and I have a lot of ministry leaders, but when you don't have a whole lot of pastors, it changes the demographic. So you got to look at that too when you're looking to get into the ministry. I mean, it's rewarding. Don't get me wrong. It's I love being able to be involved in all these ministries because it's a smaller scale, and I can do that. But when you get into the larger churches, I think they have different pastors for different ministries, and senior pastor like me is not really involved in a lot of the helps ministries or a lot of the, he may be a part of the decisions they make, but not being the hands and feet of Christ out there in those. So you got to think about that too when you're not only and like spiritual gifts too. Spiritual gifts, we all have a spiritual gift that God has given us, or gifts that God has given us, and you'll learn that as you grow into it, as you grow into your ministry. And so between that and the scope, I believe, or the size of the church, I think those are the two main factors in what you're going to do, what you're going to get involved in.
Yeah. Every context will be a little different based upon the neighborhood you're in, the size and scope of your church, and what your gifts are.
And even if the pastor isn't doing all of it outside it, you can carry the heartbeat for your people and facilitate them doing it.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, I'm going to hit the road and come out there. So we're going to handle your questions now. All right, we got one first, and then.
Kind of similar to your church. I'm like the only staff guy other than my pastor. Very limited budget, very limited time, resources. So if we had like say $1,000 a year, something that we could put into something, do you think it would be smarter to try to like make something ourselves, or do you think that that time and money and those resources would be better helping somebody else who's already doing something like that? Does that make sense? Like, what do you guys think in that situation?
That's a good point, because there's a lot of ministries that we're involved in that we work with other ministries that are already established, so that we don't have to build it from the ground up, because we don't have a lot of funding either. So that's an important thing to look at when you're getting into the ministry. Now, a lot of times what we do, and what other churches would do, is we're all involved with each other. We help each other in different ways. Some people get more donations, and then I got a call from a pastor this morning who said, "Hey, Pastor, this brother Zippy, I got 2 truckloads of whatever, 2 truckloads of items. If you guys want to come down and pick up some stuff for your outreach ministry." So we work together, and but as you grow into that and you start to get more contacts and you have your own, then you can make it your own. But I think initially, especially if you don't have the kind of money like a church like CCV has, and you're struggling a little bit, it's better to get your feet wet and work with other ministries. But you should be working with other churches anyways, other churches, other ministries, and that's, we help each other, and then we grow into our own ministry, and then it's just discipleship over and over again. And that's if that's a hurdle for you, that's one of the best ways to do it, is get involved with other churches, get to know other people that are doing the same type of ministry, and learn from them, and then later on, when you're ready, you can start your own ministry.
And I would piggyback on that and say, I think there's beautiful humility in saying we can come alongside a ministry and we're not promoting our church's name, our brand, and that we're willing to help hold their arms up while they do a good thing. And secondly, this was just something that being involved with the town of Gilbert that really jumped out at me. There are so many good organizations that are doing things, and as Americans, we're doers, and it's like someone gets a good idea, oh, let's start X, Y, and Z. When it already exists, most of the time what's really needed is human capital, is arms and feet, and a willing heart. And that costs you nothing, right, but time. And so I think it's a beautiful thing, irrespective of the size of the congregation, to find those places that are already doing a work and quietly come beside them and help hold their arms up.
We get one here.
Thank you for shouting out Washington, D.C. That's big respect. Yeah, I went to a church back in Maryland, about 45 minutes outside of there, so that was cool. But I have a question about, if you're running a congregation, if you're a pastor, you come up with this idea for an outreach ministry, like dog jail ministry or food truck ministry, something cool like that. How do you get your congregants on board? Like, how, in your own experience, have you gotten your congregation to be a part of all these really ambitious ministries? Because I mean, of course, the Holy Spirit would be first. Like, how in your experience, did you market it, campaign? Like, how is what we're doing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important. You can tell somebody about a ministry, and then you can show somebody something and let the ministry be revealed to them, in which they go, wow, something needs to be done about that. And so whatever you can do that reveals itself to somebody, and your key stakeholders in your church, the people that care a lot about things and have a big opinion about something, I think it takes patience to lead people. Because knowing, just last week, I met a guy from our church who had a certain passion about a ministry, and he wanted us to do more. We need to be doing more about this as a church. And I asked him, I said, hey, are you doing foster care and adoption? And he's like, no. I said, you care about it though, right? He's like, for sure. I said, but you're not doing it. No. I said, well, then just realize not everybody carries the same conviction and the same weight towards ministry as you do. But that doesn't mean that it's better or worse. But I think with a lot of patience is how you bring people along, and then creating an environment where they see the ministry themselves without even having to be told about it, where they catch the burden, that they catch the burden themselves.
I think for us, what we do is we have a planning stage where we try to plan a new ministry if we're going to start a new type of ministry. Even if it's the same ministry, even if we're already doing that type of ministry, but we're going in a different direction, we will, part of the planning process is to find volunteers up front that are going to want to get involved in that ministry. And then of course, we'll announce it to the congregation. And then the final step is we'll get council approval before we go through with a new ministry. So there's a lot to it. First, the need. We find the need. and then we find the people that are willing to serve in that capacity, and then we get approval, and that's the steps that we take to start a new type of outreach ministry.
I wanted to ask if you had any practical tips for working with the community that you're in, because there are some ministries where you do need to cooperate with, say, governors and things to get things done. So do you have any tips, practical advice?
At least you mean more kind of like, how do you build these networks of relationships and things like that to get cooperation?
Yes, that way the city or the town you're in and the church aren't butting heads trying to fix the same problems.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think this sounds so simple, but if the congregation of a church or the ministry team of a church would actually go and attend town council meetings, city council meetings, that right there is going to expose all of the problems, the challenges, the divisions, and conversely is going to show you opportunities of real needs that are there. And you'll start to see what's not being addressed or incompletely addressed. And that's just the most practical tip that I can tell you. And then asking good, thoughtful questions of a council member, or sitting down and just saying, hey, I want to hear your heart for the city, because you're a voter. They want to have these congregations. If you're representing a church, well, they know that you have some level of influence with people. So they're going to want you to know about the needs. And if you're listening, you're going to probably have opportunities at some level, and they'll start networking. And most cities and towns have a lot of networking opportunities to come and meet. And I just had in the town of Gilbert, I just had one of the people in our town government say that their biggest challenge is that they can get nonprofits here, they can get businesses here, but we can't get churches to come here to listen to some of our meetings and hear our needs. And I walk away from that just saying, oh my gosh, what an opportunity.
Yeah, once again, for us, it's, we work with a lot of people that are already established in the city doing that type of ministry. So if there are any hurdles to get over to get that established, they kind of let us know what to expect. But also, our church is involved with an association called the Church Ambassador Association of Arizona. And so we work with some of the legislatives and some of the representatives in Arizona from each district, whatever district you're in, and we meet with them periodically, and we they ask us questions, and then they're available for us if we need help, legal help, trying to figure out, because you can't always just start a ministry. I'll give you an example. We try to start doing meals for the homeless at the parks in Glendale one year. And come to find out that you can't just go serve meals in the parks in Glendale. So you have to get permitted for it, and you have to get food handlers cards, and you got to go through all this process to do that. And but the truth was that Glendale just didn't want anybody serving the homeless people in their parks. They didn't want to attract more people to their parks. So they would not allow anyone to do it. So what they started doing, and of course we didn't do it. We didn't want to break the law, but other ministries just started going and doing it. And eventually they just let them do it and stopped, But we tried for 6 months to get a permit in Phoenix and in Glendale. And finally we just decided we're just going to have the meals at our church. So there are going to be some hurdles, but I think the easiest way to deal with the hurdles is to work with other ministries. It's really very important to have a network of churches that are doing the same type of ministry, so that they can help you with these hurdles, and just to know what to expect.
So I go to a pretty small church now, turning there. There's only 4 full-time staff and 3 pastors, so very small. And right now we're trying to focus on discipleship and kind of opening our people's eyes to what life with Jesus could be like, like taking them deeper in that aspect. But I want to bring them I want to encourage my church to go to the area that's right around them. We're off of 32nd Street and Thunder, so right off of 51. But there's a whole bunch of areas that are like right around the church that I don't see many people representing that area in our church. But again, it's right across the street. But like the one outreach thing that we do is the first Saturday of every month they go to a retirement community and they do like gardening work for them. But we don't really see much impact of that ministry in our church. What advice would you have for that situation? Like, is it worth it to just spend more time in discipleship and growing deep in our church before we start to spread out more? Or is it worth like trying to do both of those at the same time and trying to do that outreach ministry at the same time as going deeper?
Once again, I think, and that would depend on the demographic of your neighborhood or your area, and the church, of course. But from our experience, we kind of just learn by trial and error when we're getting into something new, a new ministry or a new outreach type program. Because it's not going to be the same for everybody. It's going to be different due to the demographic that you're in and your congregation. I mean, like you said, some people are going to be engaged and some people are going to be kind of, on the fence, not really knowing if it's something they want to do or not. I think you just gotta do it and see how it pans out. And once again, a lot of prayer and meetings. Make sure you're holding meetings for your ministry often, because that makes a big difference. Communication between the people serving. In all of our outreach ministries, we meet at least once a month to discuss how we can improve what we're doing and what we're doing wrong.
And that feels like that's a fact-dependent question, right? A lot of different variables in that. But I do think doing is part of discipleship. So I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive in that. And doing what you're already doing, if it's gardening for senior citizens, it's actually a beautiful, quiet ministry, right? It's not one of those that people splash on the board necessarily of what they're doing, but that tells me that your people within your church have a heart to doing a quiet, beautiful ministry that way. So that sounds like it's a real opportunity to grow in.
Well, it's great. I want to thank you both. Can we all give them a round of applause? Again, we want to thank you. They take a night out away from family, away from ministry to come and to talk to you all. So we're really grateful for it. I like to finish each one of these just kind of praying for your ministry, and then we'll get going. So, Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for your goodness to us. We're thankful for the ministries of these 2 men, Sean and Robert, as they have devoted themselves to you. They've devoted themselves to your people, and they've devoted themselves to serving outside the walls of the church in their communities, to finding ways to bring the gospel to bear on the needs and the hurts and the brokenness of our communities. And so I just want to pray right now for them, just in gratitude for their time that they have spent with us, just sharing their wisdom and their experience. We just pray that you would continue to bear fruit of their ministries, that you would use them to bear witness to the good news of Jesus Christ, and that you would be working mightily in them and through them to bring fruit of glory to your gospel and to Jesus. And we pray that you would do all of these things in the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you again. Thank you all for coming out.